Welcome back to Building Out Loud with me, Randy Silver,
Faith Forster.
and this week we have a special guest as well. Chad, you and Faith used to work together before this project, so can you just give us a little bit of an introduction, please?
Faith and I worked together at a business called Dex, where I was the VP of product marketing, and Faith was my partner in crime as the VP of the product organization. We joined up 2 weeks apart, and our mission at the time was to make product marketing and product work together well. And I'd say we became friends throughout that process and managed to stay friends, which is as much a result as anything else.
And Faith, you got to a certain point in this project where you decided you needed Chad's help. What was the impetus?
Having done a startup before, one of the big issues I had with my previous startup was the branding was really not great. Didn't tell a good story at all. And so I knew if I was going to do something like this again, I wanted to make sure that there was a really strong brand from the start. And having worked with such good product marketing people before, I knew how important the sort of understanding of the ICP, the value prop, and the messaging around that is. And if we can get that right from the beginning, that puts us in a much stronger position. I was having a conversation with Chad and then said, look, I've got this idea. Any chance he'd be interested in helping shape it from the beginning? And he very generously said he would.
So you said getting it right from the beginning, but you were telling me earlier one of the first things you did together was work on the name. Tell us about that.
Product marketing 101 is we tend to look at a number of things working together as a system. You want to look at your positioning, which is what's this product for? What problem is it trying to solve? What space is it sitting in? What's it up against? You want to convert that into a value proposition that sits at the top, which is ultimately, if we had to say this in a short space of time, how would we talk about the value that we're actually trying to deliver? You'd break that out into messaging that you would tell to different audiences, and then you need a name that sits on the top of that and brings it all together. So one of the things you have to do when you're creating a product is get to a name. We also have to do the work of just making sure it's going to fit within a system. And you ask a number of questions. That's fundamentally about how are we going to take this idea that's going to come from a problem that Faith has lived and experienced herself very personally, and they're going to flip that to a story and a name that's going to appeal to others who are going to say, that person and that product and that business, they get us. They're talking about something that I've felt myself.
Did the first name idea work?
Absolutely not. No, naming, it's only becoming more difficult to come up with a name that's available, that fits the brief, that's going to be short, that's going to be concise, in which you can protect from an IP point of view, in which you can buy a domain name. So we went down, I would say, at least half a dozen very excited directions, thinking we had nailed it, only to find out that it wasn't something we could protect, or there was an unfortunate competitor that we hadn't spotted right away that's already got it, or the domain wasn't available. That's just the way you have to approach naming, is you never go with one. You've got to have half a dozen that you think are plausible, because something's usually going to kill four or five of those in the process.
Faith, you told me about one of the names.
We're running with Discoveree. And this took quite a number of conversations to get to this point and understanding. And it really came through from the conversations I was having with different product leaders as validation, conversations about the problem space in general. From a value prop perspective, there was two areas we could really focus on. One was the gathering of the data and using AI agents to help make that a lot easier and quicker to do. Or the second one was then really aligning the product teams and what they're delivering and where you're focusing back to value. It all sits in that sort of discovery part of the process.
There's lots of different naming types. We looked branded names, we looked at descriptive names, we looked at longer names, we looked at shorter names, we looked at ones that had a little bit of a foreign sounding slant on it because you can get a bit more name availability. But when Faith was talking about Discoveree, it had enough of a term to sound like a branded, memorable term. It had a bit of memorability behind it with a subtle shift on the spelling. So, and that's what you look for. It's not rocket science. It's a very simple shift, which makes it memorable. But the other point for me was it planted Faith's product idea very much in the space that we thought there was most valuable. You know, product teams do a lot, but one of the fundamental problem points is when you're a product manager or you're a chief product officer, you're time poor, you've got a lot of noise, you've got a lot of stuff coming out. It's very difficult to make sense of the signal within the noise of that information gathering stage. That first upfront piece of work around discovery, that part of the process, getting that right is what sets you up for all the successes going forward. If you haven't chosen the right thing at the start, you're working on the wrong problem. And there was a statement that Faith made really early, which I wrote down and I've run with, and it was, you can't prioritize what you can't see. And if you can't see what's most valuable in all the noise in that discovery process, every step you take after that's going to be wrong. So I thought it just planted the product in the part of the process that makes everything else work.
That goes really nicely into the next part. So you've got the name. How do you approach the messaging around it? Was that one line, is that the basis of messaging for you, or is there something else that you do?
I often do look for that one critical insight, and it often comes out of the person's mouth in their own words in the way they felt the problem. And that was Faith and us revisiting both our experience at Dex, but also Faith's other experience, and just saying you have product managers who are trying to juggle so much workload, usually with small teams. They've got input coming from everywhere, from sales teams, it could be coming from executives, it could be coming from research. And Faith just talking about how difficult it is to separate out what's valuable and answering this question of what should we build next. So that insight of you can't prioritize what you can't see, if you can't separate signal from noise, that's what I look for. And then you're running. My job is to usually then take this into something that's a product story to a human story and really start to unpick what are we trying to do when we talk about this product to someone else. You want to clearly describe what it is and what it does, but if you want people to take notice, you've got to reflect their problems and their pains. You've got to put it in a way that says that's the thing that I'm struggling with. So what we looked at with the messaging is product managers being overwhelmed with volume, being overwhelmed with input, having too many tools, giving too many pieces of information, but none of them giving you prioritization. That's the difference. And then if you bubble that up to somebody who's the chief product officer, who's probably going to be the one who makes the buying decision, although the product managers may be using it, that person is fundamentally what their job is, making sure the company strategy and the company's commercial objectives are translated through product value. So they're on the hook to make sure that their team is building the right thing. There are human beings wrestling with these problems and trying to put the messaging in a place where they see themselves in the way that we talk about the product.
How long do you stick with that initial hypothesis of a message? Because this is something that obviously the two of you worked on together. But I know April Dunford talks about how your customers or potential customers will tell you what your positioning is. And I know a messaging expert, Diane Weird, who once told me it's awfully hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle. And the two of you on this, you're very much inside the bottle. Does this messaging usually survive contact with other people? Does it evolve? Do you stick with it? What's the approach?
We'll probably change the messaging again shortly to take it more from what would typically be a SaaS offering. This is what it does, take it or leave it, to here's a toolkit and a set of data, a set of information, set of agents that can help you, that you then use to make them work in the way you want to work. Still covers the same problem areas and jobs to be done, but it's a slightly different positioning in terms of how we support them to do that.
Once you've got all that, it's then the execution of it. You're putting together your initial website and everything else. How do you approach that?
Chad and I would have some conversations, bounce ideas. He was quite heavily using Claude to help sort of frame that and turn those into some options that have been properly considered. And he gave me a document that was like, here's your outline for your website. And honestly, I just wanted to upload it to a tool and have it done, because that's now what I'm quite used to having. I went to Squarespace because I already had a website on Squarespace. They, in theory, have an AI agent, but it just does not work that way at all. I just found it so frustrating having to sit there and put these blocks and do these bits. It felt like I'd gone back to the dark ages. There's a website there, it works, but it's pretty clunky. And so I think I'll actually do it again, shift the messaging slightly, and I'll probably do it through Lovable. I think in that case, I could just upload the messaging and website appears.
There's two parts. We consciously tried to use AI. We're two people trying to do the heavy lifting without getting bogged down and having to write lots of copies. We actively said, let's lean on the tools. And you do find out that the tools get you pretty far. They might get you 75%, but that last 25% can still be a bit of a slog. But it did get us pretty far pretty quickly. I think part of your question was about how do we sort of translate the messaging? And you have to make some choices about what job you're actually trying to do. If you're going to build a website or a landing page, describe the product very clearly up front. If people don't get what this is very quickly, they're going to move on. If they can't put it in a box that says, I either have that and I'd be thinking about replacing what I have, or I don't have that and I should continue looking because it's a gap I need to fill. If you're leaving them going, I don't really know what that is, so I don't know what box to put it in, you've lost them. Nothing else really works. There's a statement on the top banner that says, Discoveree is. Right? And getting that set of words will remain to be tested, but you want people to go, I get that. I can mentally put that in a box. So that's job number one. You also need to get enough intrigue value in there as well. So there's also a statement that says, know which features drive value before you invest. It's just enough of a question to go, yeah, that's a pain I felt before. I felt like I've been guessing, and I felt like I've run away spending time and money on things before I was sure.
So you just mentioned testing a moment ago. You're at an early stage with this. You don't have something sellable at this point. What's your metric of success? How are you defining whether this works or not at this stage?
So the reason I wanted to get it up was because I was talking at an event and I wanted to have somewhere people would go if they wanted to find out more. But this wasn't the focus of the talk. There is a way on there that you can sign up to join the waitlist, but I haven't in any way actively promoted this. So I haven't had any sign-ups, and I'm not surprised because I've not made it discoverable yet, really. I am not far off having the first version of the product ready to test. So I will start talking about it a lot more. The first round of testing is really just making, because it is all built in an AI native tool, I'm expecting a whole lot of bugs. So just getting people to help me with that first before we even sort of get on to, is the product doing the right thing in the right way?
That's talking about testing the product itself. I'm curious at this point, and when you're doing that testing, you're probably doing it with people you know and people you already have contact with. But the marketing has to speak to people that you know as well as people you don't. So, how do you test that at this stage?
So I would say Faith is probably one of the most in the customer's face product people that I've worked with. Faith was taking the concept out when she had a couple of sentences to describe it. She was then knocking up prototypes and getting it in front of people super quickly and getting feedback. Lots of people hold on to it. Faith gets it in front of people really quickly, and she was feeding me back the raw notes from those calls. So that's not quite the same as going out and doing message testing, but I'm taking quotes from what people said and how they reacted and the problems they felt. And sometimes you can overcomplicate this job of product marketing. Sometimes you should just write what they say. And when you take it back to the landing pages, if you sort of start to go down, it's going, you're guessing which features will drive revenue. Are you finding it difficult to identify and compare and prioritize opportunities? Are you lacking confidence in where the commercial value is on your roadmap? Those are lifted from the exact things that some of the CPOs and product people that Faith was talking to. So for me, you get some of the testing before you've even written the word, if you've got out and had those human conversations.
Once I've got a working version, I'll go back and talk to these people again and ask them again, how would you describe this? What problem do you think this is solving? Refine it on that basis.
Did a startup before, had some experiences at larger organizations. I'm curious, how has this process been different than last time you tried the startup route?
Oh gosh, completely different. I know what I'm doing now. When I did my startup, I had not done a tech business ever. I feel like I was learning everything the hard way. I have a lot more experience. I have a lot more very knowledgeable people like Chad that I can draw on as I need to. It's a little bit of a different approach. Some of the questions Chad was asking me early on were really great questions around the ICP and what the sales process would likely be and what sort of price range are we talking, and some of those core questions around the business model, which I'm still not sure about actually, whether I want to turn this into an actual startup or keep it as a side project or get investment and go big. I really don't know what I want to do with it just yet.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about that this week. That's in the next episode.
Yeah, that's a whole topic in itself. But that really changes things. Whereas before I was very committed. This is a startup. I got investment. You have to make it work, right? Whereas at the moment, I'm still very open to the fact that this is not interesting enough or different enough to what already exists that it's of particular value. It's a very different approach. And I think just having the AI tooling now, I couldn't create a working product without getting proper investment. It was too expensive. I've been able to create something in a number of weeks that I can get people actually using, seeing what they think. So the level of commitment doesn't have to be as high now.
Chad, any last thoughts?
I've taken a business from startup to exit and sign my house against the bank guarantee in the process of doing so. So I know how much of a leap it is to put your heart and soul into something and your finances and your time and decide to not take a job and build a product. So one of the best parts about this is let's get to a name, let's get to a landing page, let's get to some messaging. But the big piece for me when I'm thinking about a founder is actually helping a founder get to confidence and just playing back to go, is it a bit like this or is it a bit like this? And have you thought about this? And can I just push you in this way? And they go away and you see the confidence build and you see the clarity start to come out. And then you see them go, I've got it. And we're not quite there, but at certain steps, Faith going, I know what this is. And just that confidence to then go out, because it's a big commitment to do this. And I think that's one of the best parts of working at this early stage is seeing a founder get to, I have something here that I can run with. So yeah, that's been fun. And I really enjoy that process.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. That's all for this week, but we teed up the subject for next week if you're watching carefully. So come back soon.